Skip Schoening, and he's a retired Associate Director of Montgomery County Department of Parks. And he will talk to us this morning about the local award-winning parks and botanical gardens. Skip graduated from the University of Maryland with a degree in ornamental horticulture, and in September 1956, he was hired by the Maryland National Capital Park and Planning Commission as its very first horticulturist. He moved up the ladder, becoming chief of the Horticulture and Forestry Division in Montgomery County. Skip was instrumental in the planning and development of Brookside Nature Center and Brookside Gardens, which is the first botanical garden to be developed in the state of Maryland. In May of 1976, Skip was promoted to Associate Director of Montgomery County Department of Parks, taking on even more comprehensive responsibilities. After 35 and a half years of service, Skip retired in May 1992. You must have retired, Skip, at 40 years old.
Yeah, right. He retired in 90.
On Friday, he told me he feels like he
that's
just
right, because Kyle was a
recently
baby,
left
that's
his
true.
beloved position.
92, right.
Skip and his wife, Janet. Janet, raise your hand, please. Have two children. Are the two children here, or at least one? Okay, 2 children, 5 grandchildren, and 2 great-grandchildren. Let's give Skip a big Jewish War veteran's hand. Take it away.
That's right, because Kyle was a baby. I forgot the kids were little when he retired.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, we had a heart attack in 92 when Kyle was a baby.
Sunday.
Super,
Church was in.
Super Bowl Sunday.
Good morning, everyone.
Morning.
It's certainly my pleasure to be with you today and speak to this august group about something that's near and dear to my heart in the Montgomery County Park System. I thought I would explain, just to start off by explaining what the words the Maryland National Capital Park and Planning Commission means. We were set up as established in 1927 by the General Assembly in Maryland to be a bi-county organization that for Prince George's and Montgomery County. And it was to provide 2 things. One was the development of the counties in a good way, which is the planning part, and then it was to provide for open space and recreational opportunities for Montgomery and Prince George's County. So we've been established since 1927. We're unique that the commission is a bi-county organization. I don't know of any place else where that is the case. Not good? Maybe a little higher. Okay, is that better? Can you hear me okay, Naomi? So I was hired in 1956 as the first horticulturist, and they had 2 landscape architects who wanted their plans taken into the field and implemented. I was 24 years old. I really didn't want to fly a desk all day, and I thought I had died and gone to heaven. It was just a job that was meant for me. I could work outside a lot, and we had a naming jar that I went down. That's where some of the people I found, I walked in, and there was a landscape gardener named Jules Fritz, who was about 50 years old, and I'm 24. And I walk in and I'm his boss. And he looked at me with a lot of being very leery of who I was. But after about a year, he told me I was his best friend, so we kind of won that battle. But I learned a lot from Jules. In college, you learn a lot of things from your books and studying botany and about plant material and all of those kinds of things that you have to know about horticulture. but you don't really learn the practical things where you get your hands dirty. And so I was really learning that from Jules. He was digging large, good-sized trees and moving them with very little equipment. And I was just standing there in amazement and watching these things happen. And so I told him over the years that I felt like I had gotten 2 educations, one in college and one from him. It was that good. And he had been the personal gardener for Harold Ickes, who was the Secretary of Interior at one time. You may recall that name because it was such an odd name, Ickes.
That's the Rowan and Lark bed and breakfast. Rowan and Lark bed and breakfast.
I hadn't worked as a horticulturist for about 4 years, and nobody really told me what to do. I mean, the director of parks was a man named Jack Hewitt, who was a tremendous leader of men. Jack was just so much fun to work for. His philosophy was hire good people and let them do their work. And I felt like I had complete freedom. I could get in the car and go to any place I wanted in the park system. I could go anytime I wanted. I could do most anything I wanted. I could get the programs going that I wanted to get going. But after about 4 years, he called me into his office and he said, "Carl, how come we don't have nature centers in our parks?" And I thought to myself, I'm a horticulturist, I'm not a naturalist. Why is he asking me that question? So I said, "Well, do you want to look into that?" And he said, "Yes." So I went to DC. I knew it was one nature center was in Rock Creek Park. And I went there and talked to a couple of fellows who saw their nature center, which was actually in a house. And that was before on a DC street. It was not very naturalistic, but they were going to move to a center in Rock Creek Park. And they said, "You should really go on a trip. You should see some of these nature centers in Columbus, Ohio, and Cincinnati, and Kentucky, and in Wheeling, and in Wheeling, West Virginia." So I came back with that idea, and he said, "Sure, go ahead and do that." And I did it. And I came back with a lot of good ideas, and I said, we were developing Wheaton Regional Park at that time. That was our first regional park, and it was 500 acres. And Jack Hewitt, who was the director, was also the land acquisition officer. And he was buying up parcels of land to get the 500 acres of the park taking lines that we needed. And one building that was there was a redwood siding home. And it sat up on a hill with a forest behind it and a stream in front of it. So I said to Jack, "You give me that redwood siding house, I'll give you a nature center." He said, "Fine, it's yours." So I thought about it for a couple of days, and I went back and I said, "Well, I need to hire a naturalist, because I can't run the horticulture program and run the nature program at the same time. Somebody has to be there all the time and would be programming for schools and scout groups and the public and so forth." So he said, "Fine." So I looked into that. I hired a gentleman named Stan Ernst, and he and I made all of the exhibits. And in the interim, we found a gentleman who was looking for a job, who was a taxidermist with the Smithsonian. His name was Danny Reimer. And we hired Danny, and I thought we had pulled off the biggest coup ever. This guy was really, really talented. And he helped us a lot, and he helped spruce up some of the exhibits that we had done. And later on, he became chief of our exhibit shop and did some wonderful, wonderful work for the park system over many, many years. He's retired now and lives in Tennessee. So it was just great fun to develop that nature center, and it opened May 10th, 1961. And I remember that date very well because I got married 3 days later. And that's not too hard a date to remember. So let me tell you a little bit about the type of parks we have, and I'll relate to you some facts and figures about our park system. And it is our park system. It's your park system, it's mine, it belongs to all the people of Montgomery County. And we are funded by your tax dollars. We have several types of parks. One type that you may be familiar with are our Stream Valley parks, which is like Rock Creek Park has Beach Drive, Sligo Creek Parkway, and then there's Little Falls Parkway. And we have regional parks. There's like 5 or 6 regional parks. There's Wheaton Regional Park, which is 500 acres. Cabin John Regional Park, which is 500 acres. Upper Rock Creek Regional Park, which has Lake Needwood and Meadowside Nature Center. Little Bennett Regional Park, which is Upper County, right off 270, is not 500 acres, but 3,500 acres. And then there's Black Hill Park, which is up near Boyd's and